Welcome to Mystics and Masters. I'm Amy Torres, and my guest today is Stuart Schwartz. Stuart and I go back quite a few years. We've become friends. He started as my mentor, and Stuart gives satsang in the United States and in Ireland and Canada, Stuart, and even in Cyprus a couple of years ago. So I would say throughout the world. And these days you're also giving virtual satsang, aren't you, with your own Zoom room?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we'll give you that information at the end of the show or in the show notes if you'd like to explore Stuart's offerings as well as his website. I'd like to read you the bio that Stuart shared with me because it's very interesting the way he refers to himself and does not refer to himself. Stuart says that when he was in Istanbul a couple of years ago, he read how Rumi summarized his own life. Rumi said, "I was immature, I became experienced, I was consumed." And then Stuart writes, "I could divide this lifetime in those categories also, starting with a life driven by conditioning, resulting in a very successful appearance without much satisfaction. Then the search for real happiness and peace. Decades of working with different modalities and sitting with many masters, leading to teaching others how to relinquish conditioning and experience peaceful silence. And now satsang starts with the truth of everyone, the perfection of self. The tapestry of life includes all as the expression of consciousness without any separation. Anything that attempts to obscure this truth melts in its power." This is very characteristic of Stuart, that he speaks in a poetic manner and in a pithy manner as well. If you get on his mailing list, you'll see that his emails are very short and to the point and often make me bust out laughing because he'll include a cartoon or something funny. And Stuart and I both share a background in advertising. So he's a great art director and he has a real sense of style and makes a very interesting master. Welcome, Stuart.
Thank you, Amy. I didn't consider myself a master, but I like the friend part. Thank you.
Yeah, a master. How about if we just say a mystic? Because it's not, about perfection or even, in my mind, expertise. It's just about recognizing truth.
That's very well said.
So I was talking to you before we started the actual interview about how I was struck by your bio that you only mentioned the word I once.
And I wasn't aware of that. And it was probably when I was talking about the past, right?
Yes, it was the very first word in this little bio is, I could divide this lifetime in those categories also. The categories being, I was immature, I became experienced, I was consumed. But those are Rumi's words. And I've noticed also in things that I write that me and Amy has dropped out of it. And there's this possibility of writing in what might seem like a passive voice, but it's really not passive because somehow, if you're a person that words come to, and I know that happens for you, Stuart, if words come to you, then the I is implicit in those words or something like that. Would you agree?
As you're talking to me, I know that we're trying to express something that's very hard to express because when you use words like passive, people start backing up a little bit because it doesn't have such a great connotation to be passive in society.
Yeah.
Aggressive, as we can see, is very much the norm. Pushy, getting what you want. Forcefulness, actually. So as you were talking, I was actually sensing what you were feeling as you were saying that. And I think I understand that the way to describe not being identified as the I is that there is a sensation, a knowingness of somebody, no, scratch that, not somebody, that which cannot be described, that's emanating inside, in the heart center.
Yes.
Mostly. Just some kind of vibration that comes before You even say a word, even before you think. And somehow that takes over. So call that what you will. It's really indescribable and nameless and formless, but very present.
Yes.
And when that's not there, you're really not there. You know what I mean?
I do. I too am feeling or sensing what you mean. Yes. So, so many people talk about I am that I am, Nisargadatta Maharaj. And now in this conversation, we're speaking about the knowing before words.
Which is the I am. Which is the I am. You could say that the person is very much apparent. The appearance is right here. We're talking, it's great to get back together with you after all this time. Haven't seen you in a while. And yet that sensation, that vibration is what's coming first. And not the personal. That's what I would say.
There's a great clarity and simplicity to that.
I think so. And when it's not there, you definitely feel like something is missing. You're gone. You're gone. Then you have to effort. Then you have to try and, accomplish something or try and emulate something. But without that trying and effort, well, you're present and you can relax. I guess that's why you use the word passive, because it's coming from the background rather than the foreground.
Yes. And I guess also just having been an English major and a writer, it was probably also a grammatical reference to the passive voice.
I see.
I'm often not sure why I say things, Stuart. I'm very guided by intuition or this process of words come to me. So it's a feeling knowing, not an analytical calculation.
You're not thinking.
I'm not. Of course, I can catch monkey mind thinking all sorts of things much of the time, but there's a detachment from that and awareness of that. So I'm not overly engaged.
I understand. I'm not either.
Yes, clearly. So maybe you could explain a little more to the viewers, the audience. I was immature. I became experienced. I was consumed.
Well, I would say that I did what I was supposed to do when I was younger, either with gung-ho activeness or resistance. But I knew what the path was to success. You finish school, you do your graduate work, you go out and get a career and a family, and you're all set. And then life takes off. And somehow that just didn't do it. It just didn't feel right. So I started looking for, what is it? What is it that gives you what you really want? Not what looks right, but what really feels right. And I found out that it's very counterintuitive, and it goes completely against all the conditioning that we are, I'll use the word mesmerized in. We are mesmerized by our whole lives, everybody that's in authority, from our parents to our teachers to our bosses, on and on, the whole society, and particularly advertising, we both know that, correct? About desire and what will make us happy. And we say we're not really affected, but we are. We really want those things, and we really have a belief, even if it's subconscious, that will make us happy. And we keep going after it. Even if we know it doesn't, we keep going. Because there isn't much of a choice.
Until we know somehow that there is a choice, it seems like there are just two choices. In my life, it seemed like there were two choices, that I could either go with the program or go against the program. But then I found there was a third way.
So did you go through some resistance?
My personality is not a resistant one. It would be more on the side of compliant and just a nice spirit of cooperation. I would say that's the middle way, that my natural essence was a spirit of cooperation. But if I was in conditioning, people would get over on me due to my compliance. And then, I had to learn on the level of the person how to stand up for myself in a way that felt effective and also true to myself. And again, that is, I think, the counterintuitive thing that you're mentioning. I just want to say that it's been a very rainy day here in Southern California. And now the sun is coming out at certain times when I'm speaking with you. And it's interesting to see the whole room lit up. And then the image of me just starts to disappear. It glows.
You're disappearing. That's fabulous. And here in sunny Florida, it's been raining all day.
I love that Florida rain. I love how it just, it's so electric. I love it.
But it's unusual. We've been having a cold spell and rain.
So in the way of the world right now, a person would feel conditioned to get up and fix the lighting for the video. But instead, you and I are just enjoying the glow.
Well, I'm enjoying watching you in the glow. Like disappearing into the light. I can't
And that's part of the third way that I'm mentioning, or what I think you're talking about, when we somehow reach that point where being mesmerized is no longer the only choice.
Catching the conditioning is really the thing that's most important, because we're so lost in it, we don't even realize that it's operating most of the time. And I'm not just talking about, the jobs that you have or the career or the family and all that. I'm talking about the whole thing seems to be inescapable. You know what I mean? It's like I am this person and I'm supposed to do all of these things. And then maybe there's a reprieve out of that when I meditate, when I do something, go to a church or something. But what I'm talking about is something like before the whole thing, before you even think of anything, you know exactly what's going on. And I would call it emptiness. Not trying to get somewhere higher like the world does. The conditioning is always climb up higher and get smarter, perhaps more spiritual, more enlightened. I would say the world will always show you what you're holding. And if you take it, positive or negative, and stay with it, it'll reveal this beautiful emptiness. And then you reveal yourself, which is always there. Everybody is that, but usually turning away from it and getting lost, trying, efforting, and struggling and tightening. And all of that is counterproductive as far as I could see it.
Counterproductive to what?
To trying to get yourself into a higher position, more aware, more closer to the goal of, you would say, perhaps being closer to God.
So if you're using meditation as a reprieve from the pressures of your own life, then that's just an ego-induced form of peace.
No, I would say that it's a very good action to meditate and to ease pressure and to go into yourself and to really feel that presence. And I'm suggesting that there's a possibility of even going deeper and forgetting about yourself for the moment, consciously.
Mm-hmm. Can we
Yeah.
do it now, Stuart? Can you guide the listeners and the viewers?
Well, we would be very silent, wouldn't we? I would
Yes.
say, I would say that it would be very specific. For example, let's just take a general situation. Let's say somebody is irritated about something and they're trying not to be irritated. So they're trying to talk themselves out of it, perhaps, or they're trying to deny it. Or what we mostly do is blame the other one for irritating us. We have a whole scenario of, I am now irritated and I have to do something about it. So what I'm saying is to notice what's going on and feel the irritation, really feel it, so that it's not pie in the sky, it's not really irritating me. It is. And I don't like it. So I really touch it. It's like touching a hot stove. And then turning away from it and leaving it alone as best you can. And then if it starts up again, you face it, you feel it, you really feel it. It's kind of miraculous that if you take situations that you really don't like and actually witness them and stay with them without the intention for them to go away, because then that's like trying to maneuver, or you know what I mean, like
Yes.
trying to really change it, by doing something. But I'm talking about just feeling it and as best you can, just allowing it to be the way it is, allowing yourself to be irritated, and then turning away, and then turning away some more. So then there's nobody to be irritated.
Yes, I'm fully with you, since this has very much been my path, the path of psychology and psychotherapy, where I discovered on my own, also as a writer, I guess my writing life and getting into journalism a little bit, where the idea was to be objective, and then entering psychotherapy as a client, where the therapist was supposed to be objective, and then being guided to feel my feelings, and doing that with a lot of fear, but doing that. It was a miracle, Stuart, just like you said, that I found that if I went all the way through a feeling, not only did I survive the feeling, but I emerged purified. For instance, I will never forget one time my therapist encouraged me to go into a feeling of humiliation. And that was the last feeling I wanted to go into. I think humans in general avoid any kind of shame, humiliation, embarrassment, guilt as best as they can. But I voluntarily went in there. And to my amazement, when I came out the other side, I recognized myself as pure and innocent, because I developed a spontaneous compassion for myself, reenacting this interaction that I had with my father as a young child, where I felt very humiliated. But that was because I was seeing myself through his eyes and accepting my father's version of myself in that situation, which was shameful. But when I came through it, I realized I was just an innocent young child with my own yearning for my father to understand me, though he did not, and that I was guilty of nothing.
Hmm. That's a
And
beautiful example. And it's just so clear. It's just exquisite. Now, just imagine somebody, not yourself, who had a parent who was constantly like that, constantly pointing out error or doing humiliating things, and, usually not looking at themselves and sharing their own faults on their little children. And it's constant. Imagine that. And kids being so free and easy, usually just, oh, that doesn't matter. They just go off and play and leave it alone. They're pretty free. But if it's constant, and one day perhaps they feel a little down and they hear it one more time that you're no good, perhaps, and they start believing it. And how many times do you hear that I'm unworthy? People that look like they're most successful, if you really just ask them a little under the surface, there's unworthiness. So one day you hear it in a despondent mood, and you say, well, yeah, it's probably true. Oh, really? I really am no good. And now the conditioning is in there. And it's operating in all kinds of ways to protect yourself from ever being seen as unworthy. And it protects itself in ways that even when you discover it and you're trying to see through it, it defends itself. It's like it gets so twisted, it defends itself. And you're holding on to what you know, even if it's giving you what you don't want. It's very convoluted,
Yes.
It takes an awful lot of looking at these things just to see it from so many different facets and really allowing yourself to feel what you don't want to acknowledge. Like you were describing, it is so valuable. I find that when I'm working with people and they actually see what they're holding and allow it to be exactly the way it is, something just opens up. The total awareness to something really huge, the spacious feeling. Wow, look at that. Not only am I not unworthy, but I'm not the one holding it.
Yes, I follow. Yeah, because as I was saying, in journalism, you're supposed to be objective. As a psychotherapist, you're supposed to be objective. But when I moved through that experience, and that was just one of many, but it was, very striking, where through humiliation, I recognized my innocence, I also became aware that nothing is personal. Nothing is personal. My father wasn't personally reacting to me. He was coming.
Except if it's taken personally.
Right. You can take something personally, but nothing is really personal. We're all just acting out our conditioning and trying to get our own needs met. And it takes the onus off of that feeling, the imposter syndrome of me being unworthy and me being bad, when I begin to realize that none of my parents acting out had anything to do with me.
That's very, very advanced. Congratulations.
Well, I want to thank you for something you said to me during satsang years ago. I think it was the satsang in New York City that I attended of yours, where we started talking, and you asked me what I had been doing in this meditation you had led. And I said I had reached a point where I was just saying thank you to the Holy Spirit and maybe to Jesus and just to the gods and goddesses. I was just saying thank you. But you detected something, Stuart, and you asked me something like, what if you didn't have to be grateful? What if you didn't have to say thank you? And it was a pop. I felt so relieved. It was a big thing for me that even doing the right thing, like maybe I got a little bored during meditation, so I resorted to gratitude, but gratitude was a burden.
Well, it's the right thing that you mentioned, and I'm so glad that you mentioned it, because if you're not doing the right thing, what are you doing in the world? The wrong thing.
Yes.
So, most of us, I would say, are very good people doing the best that we can to do the right thing and, create, you could say, good karma, good relationships, But if we notice that we get really locked in to having to do the right thing, and you can't do the right thing unless you're holding the wrong thing just as equally, if you know what I mean. It's like you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
So there's so much effort to at least appear that you're right. And some people have to be right about everything, but you have to appear to be good, and you have to push away everything that's the opposite. Because how else can you be good? If you can't, you must deny the opposite. So the whole world is like a balancing act of doing the right thing, or at least being seen for doing the right thing, so you're safe. You can't be faulted. So it's very strenuous, and that's the conditioning right there, good and bad. That duality is constantly running us, and when you see it operating, you could leave it, because there are no supposed tos in the openness. You just are. You are yourself. I mean, how beautiful is that when you see somebody acting, for example, on stage in a movie, and they're so in the character that it's so real that they're not acting. They can just be completely expressive. And so can we, without any kind of concern about, is it good enough? Did I do it right? All of that stuff.
Yes, yeah. This is the third way that I'm thinking about, that as you say, in the world of duality, it's good or bad, it's pleasure or pain, but they're interlocking. You can't have one without the other. But the third way is just the knowing before conditioning. And it's, I think Muji says it's so obvious, but it's not obvious until it's obvious.
Well, it's really as simple as this. If you consider yourself, your mind, as you, then you're automatically locked into right and wrong, because your own mind can only see things according to opposites, up and down, male and female, good and bad. That's all it can do. This is good and this isn't. So automatically you're conditioned that the mind is who you are and it comes first. And that totally is not the truth. I mean, the
So
mind is,
I want to jump in and interrupt you a moment to
oh,
show.
okay.
I want to show people your book, The Great Undoing: Dissolving the Me into the Infinite. And this book is filled with poems or aphorisms. You can see that the copy on the pages is short. So I have one in hand that I think speaks to what you're saying. You wrote, "The mind condemns what is beyond its control and understanding."
Yes, because it wants to be in control, and it will keep you involved as any way that it can, so you don't leave it. Because if you leave it, what kind of control can it have? So you could say that the mind has the desire to be in control, and it doesn't really care if you benefit from it or not.
Exactly. Could you say that again?
I said that the mind would rather be in control rather than you having what you really want, which is peace and openness and happiness. You would rather be right in the mind than, being wrong. So if you listen to it and you think it's you every moment telling you what it thinks is true, then you're stuck. You're stuck believing that.
You're stuck on the hamster wheel of believing in personal identity.
Right.
You wrote here on this page, "How would I know myself without the me?"
We were talking about that before we even got into the conversation, weren't we? That vibration, the awareness of existing, you could say. That pure awareness of existing is like a vibration that comes before the mind operates. And I don't want to make it look like, against the mind. The mind is a wonderful thing, the intellect, to study things, to, plan trips, to do your taxes. You need your mind, your intellect. But when the mind starts taking over your emotions and your state of being and judging you and, well, you could say becoming your parents,
Mm-hmm.
And then it's
In
drilling you.
psychology, we would call it an introject.
Is that what it's called? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So when it starts to do that, then it's completely out of its league because it is not your nature. It is a tool. And you use it just like you would use any tool. You know, we wouldn't say we're our hands, although our hands are very useful. We have them. We have a mind. But we are something much, much bigger.
I'd like to read something else in your book. This is one of your longest ones, maybe the longest. You wrote, "You are a character in a movie. You finally got the lead. Everyone you see is the supporting cast. Everything seen is on the screen of life. Your bedroom is backstage. Your closet is wardrobe. You have no choice but to awaken each day and take on your role, even sick days. Your words are scripted. You must speak them. You either witness and allow, or forget it's a movie and react. Then everything matters big time. Better is better, isn't it? Now you are a star with attitude. What I say goes. Who can argue with one who is asleep to what they really are? Yes, you are the one and only, but just the same as everyone and everything you see. A spontaneous player. Enjoy."
You read that very nicely.
Thank you. Does it feel like you wrote it, or does it feel like you're hearing it for the first time?
Well, you know, I wrote that a few years ago, and I hadn't read it in a long time. So it was nice to hear it in your feminine voice, and you read it beautifully.
Thank you.
I might have said it a little differently today, but it's I still feel the same way.
Because it's a timeless truth.
Yeah, you could say that. It's like if you could really see life as your own personal sitcom, we might laugh more. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
We might. There's a possibility. I'm not saying we would, but it's a good possibility. Because if you look at television, you know, our lives are pretty much like that, aren't they?
Yeah. You say on the next page, you might want to see a better movie, but this is what's playing.
That's what everybody wants to change. This is what's playing, yes.
This is a very fun book because you can open it to any page and get a little piece of wisdom, something thought-provoking, an insight. Here, I just opened anywhere and it says, "Thought speaking. You are the worst of the worst. There is no hope. I hear you, I get it. Thank you, I get it. You can't ever get the approval of the mind."
Even if it's telling you you're good, it has an ultimate motive.
Ulterior motive.
Ulterior, right?
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the dog who makes cameo appearances throughout your book.
I don't explain.
You don't explain. And the first time he shows up, he's upside down.
Yeah.
He's like a Rin Tin Tin kind of a dog.
He is.
Would you tell us a little more?
You want me to explain? Well,
Yeah.
you know, dog backwards is God.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, that's why I put the dog there. And sometimes it's in multiples because the mind can see if you're looking at the dog as mind versus God. So if it's upside down, it's confusing, and you're thinking of all kinds of ways to get out of it, change things. I don't like this movie. What do I do? At the end, the dog is leaving, right?
Yeah.
He walks away. He's half on, half off.
Let me find that. I'm looking for the last dog picture. Yes, half on, half off.
Mm-hmm. So I'm actually using it as a metaphor for mind.
Mm-hmm.
And when he leaves, it's invisible. No more symbol. It's something that's always interested me so much to try and understand and convey things that are very complicated spiritually in very easy to understand ways. Because, people will ask you, do you believe in God? And everybody that you know will say yes, pretty much, or no. But how can you really know God? How can you really feel and know the reality of that and try and describe it? Pretty difficult, isn't it? Pretty
Yes.
difficult. What I discovered is that the absolute emptiness, formless emptiness, merges one in that awareness of God. Otherwise, like you said, the monkey mind, or I'm using the image of the dog, takes over. And it's always me trying to get somewhere or be somewhere or be connected to something. But it's really the absence of the form that is known by the individual is when one actually merges into the infinite. And the simple truth that I've discovered is that you cannot be anything other than that because it's a given, except we've moved away from it and lost ourselves in trying to find it or trying to ignore it. Either being totally intellectual or totally spiritual or totally in business or finance or whatever it is, we've made something else God. And some of us have very nice lives in those, scientists and engineers and all kinds of directions that we've done. But if we just step back and know ourselves as that infinite emptiness, it's over. You're right here, right now, doing whatever it is that you do. That's how I see it.
Yes. And I think people encounter this, but dismiss it or forget that they know because they think that they're supposed to enter some kind of perfect state where the personality no longer demands attention.
That's a good point. Because we look at saints, gurus, as somebody who has done that. Somebody that has given up on the world and has given up on money and power and sex, and they've become completely something else. And I would say most people don't really want that. I don't think they really want to give up their lives. And I'm not suggesting giving up your life. I'm saying to leave it for a moment, just to test it out, just to leave the identity alone and see what happens. See what you lose and see what you gain.
And I would like people to know that if they try the practice you suggested, which is simply to observe, for instance, the feeling of irritation, to stay with it, to allow yourself to feel it, to come through the other side without reacting, and just find out more.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that it's a subtle thing because we really don't want to face those things. We want to not feel irritated, or we get upset and blame and yell and all that stuff. So the way you're describing it is accurate, but I would say you may have to do it many times. You may have to look at the same situation and really feel how strong the irritation is and how strong the feeling is to blame or to deny. Because you have to really be in touch with what's exactly going on. And the
Yes.
stronger you allow it, it's an amazing thing. The stronger you allow what you don't like, the more the openness will reveal itself. It's exactly the opposite about climbing the hill, the mountain, to the heights of knowingness, but really taking the mundane, what's going on right now, and really getting to the point that you can allow what you really don't like. It's really something. And then see what happens.
Yeah. And A Course in Miracles says that the merest hint of irritation is exactly the same as murderous rage, in that in the world of duality, anger is anger. So
Wow, I didn't know they said that.
yes, yeah. And so to me, it's very helpful because you realize that, oh, I'm trying to have degrees, a hierarchy of illusions is how A Course in Miracles would put it, that, well, I can get irritable sometimes, but I'm not really an angry person. But yes, if you're a person, you have anger just like every other person because you're a dualistic entity. So,
And you want what you want.
and if you start to realize there's no shame in that, it just comes with the territory of ego mind, then there's an unhooking, detachment. So for people who are saying very earnestly, I want to do this, but it just doesn't work for me. I think your point about you have to do it over and over and over again. It's a kind of systematic desensitization to feeling what you've been trying not to feel.
Yes, that's very true. You have to be pretty honest about what's going on. And we have an awful lot of rules about you should be not an angry person. Anger is kind of the kind of thing that makes you a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
Be nice. Particularly young girls are always taught that.
Mm-hmm.
Be gentle, be soft. Don't. And then look what's going on in society now. Speak up. Enough is enough, Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up society because, of course, people get tripped up by that. And, the way things are currently, people want to be responsible and do what they can to maintain a democracy. And can you speak to just being a good citizen or somebody who feels drawn to some kind of social activism?
Well, I think that if you are yourself, you always are guided to do the right thing that you're supposed to, for yourself, what's right for yourself, rather than follow some kind of agenda. My focus mostly is to work with people to see what conditioning they're working under. Because I always look at it, if you can just reach a single person to unlock the things that are keeping them locked up in that duality, back and forth, creating the same thing over and over, that's how I'm helping society. One person that's out of the loop of trying and efforting and not getting what they want. Unlocking that, I think that's what I've come to. My groups are kind of intimate. I usually hold them, if I'm at home in Florida, in my living room. We'll have a dozen or so people. And so it's like we're friends. We're in the comfort of the home. Anything can be said. Everything is private. And it's amazing how the same we all are, different stories, but pretty much the same emotion.
Yes, definitely. And I've attended satsang at your home more than once, and it is an intimate, warm environment.
Yeah, and it's not about trying to fit into some kind of a system, because freedom is not a system. Freedom is the freedom. You looking for another thing to read?
Yeah, I found one here. It says a whole life, or you said, a whole life can be spent identifying as a man or a woman, forgetting to enjoy the intimacy with one's essence, which ignites the form.
Sounds pretty profound, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, yeah, you said the intimacy of meeting in your home, and that sparked the word intimacy, that I had liked this particular one. A whole life can be spent identifying as a man or a woman, or these days, as neither, interestingly, forgetting to enjoy the intimacy with one's essence, which ignites the form.
That's about as intimate as you can get.
I think I always want people to know that they don't have to have a big bang experience or a big light show type of experience to recognize what they already are. In my experience, people get hung up on, they don't think that they know who they are because they haven't had the proper kind of experience. And I think people have the sense that it's like an orgasm. Like, if you had it, if you didn't have it. In terms of spiritual awakening.
And everybody's had many orgasms in their life, but they don't last, do they? They come and they go. Everything is coming and going. So many people have had great awakenings, and they're searching for them again, like I used to have. Where is it? I'm supposed to be free. I've had this awakening, and I will no longer have any feelings that are negative, perhaps. All kinds of ideas about how it will be. And that's not the truth. The truth is, you are in a different place of understanding, and then everything that's going on is allowed to be exactly the way it is. If you really look at it, if you allow things to be the way they are, then you're really in a position, a knowingness, not position, scratch that. You know internally that you fully accept yourself exactly the way you are. And if you can accept yourself, pretty easy to accept things that are outside of yourself.
So are you saying to start with accepting the personality?
Including the person, especially the personality, yes.
Mm-hmm. And then from there, there's an unfolding and unhooking?
I wouldn't even say unfolding, unhooking. It is the personality, the positive traits, the ones that you like, and the negative ones that you're trying to either get rid of or tuck away, or however you deal with them. But what if you accepted the dark as well as the light? What if you accepted the shadow side that you think must be gotten rid of, but you befriend it? Imagine befriending that which you don't like, that which you might be shameful about. Whatever it is, you totally learn to accept it. No more stiffening up and holding against it, opening to it. Not for any other purpose than to see that it's serving you in ways that you may not even have realized. You see?
Yes, yeah. I think my question is, are you advising people to start at the level of their person and their personality in order to discover the knowing that comes before that?
Absolutely. You must do that. You can't jump over and say, I am something, indescribable, and still have the tendency to put yourself down, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Or because it's the putting yourself down that always makes you feel like you can't actually get to the understanding of who you really are, because it'll always pull you back. So you must deal by putting your attention on everything that's going on. You can't let anything escape. And that's the benefit, really allowing yourself to be. This is how it is. I've always tried to be different, and I saw that it failed. Certain things left, and certain things got better, but this is who I am. And it's not a tragedy.
Yes, I'm right here with you. very much so.
Yeah.
So I'm often asked by people, then how come saints and sages who are realized masters, such as Ramana Maharshi, uh, may end their life with a disease like cancer? I believe Ramana had elbow cancer, and have a painful demise with an illness. How does that happen when they're fully realized?
Well, I would start with saying that a fully realized sage like Ramana, and many of the sages died of cancer. Nisargadatta, Vivekananda, I believe, and others. Robert Adams, my teacher. First of all, they knew that the form wasn't their identity. And no body lasts forever. Something is going to take the body, but their attention was on something much more, well, unspeakable, vastness like the sky. You know, their awareness, like Ramana, when he was leaving the body, said, "Where can I go? I'm always here. My awareness is always here." And Robert would always say, your true identity is pure awareness. Now, just the words, just pure awareness, you can't fathom unless you actually enter it. But it's definitely before you think and know anything with your mind. And that pure awareness can actually be felt by going back and looking at how the life force, the breath, enters the body. That's going on 24 hours a day. We don't give it much credit, this life force. But if you don't have that breath coming and going, you don't have a mind or a body. So if we really go back to where that breath is coming from the emptiness, the breath is coming and coming into us. I mean, it looks like we're breathing it in, but actually we're receiving this life. And if we actually just follow the breath very, very gently, not making it better, not trying to breathe better, no particular exercise, just the noticing of it. As we're breathing in, just in that moment that it enters us, there can be an awareness of pure awareness. Bodiless, formless, no different than the sages. It's always there if we turn our attention to it. And then we know right now, not later. Now.
Yes, right now. Yes. Yeah, I've had the experience of maybe this words come to me thing of it's like an inner idea or knowing keeps coming up that when the body falls away, breathing continues. It's not that breathing stops.
Let's say more about that.
It was just a sensing or a knowing that that life force, which I'm using the word breath, that the natural essence or dynamism of life continues to breathe. And so as humans, we think that breathing stops and then the body is dead. But actually, the body falls away at a certain point, and breathing never begins or ends. It was something like that.
Well, it sounds like you're tuning into the pulse of the universe. You know, there's always this yin and yang of the tide coming in and going out, and the sun rising and setting. It's always in a circular kind of a pattern, just like the breath, just like feeling the pulse in the body, in the wrist, or anywhere. Anything that we can possibly feel, if we really look into it, has a kind of a pulse, back and forth. And if we tune into that, it opens up a whole vast awareness of beingness, indescribable, but very, very beautiful.
I love the way you said that. So that makes me remember that I was first tuned into the breath when I was 25 years old and took a yoga class, and then stayed with yoga on and off for many years. And then I got into Sufism, and that's all about feeling your feelings. And I discovered that the breath is a sensual pleasure that in my upbringing, I think my mother, when she was anxious, if she concentrated on her breath, which people often recommend to help you calm down, that only made her more anxious because, she felt like she wasn't breathing right and she was feeling very tense. So it was difficult to get a good full breath. And so that was the worst thing she could do. So I was kind of raised in an environment of restricted breathing, which is very common. And then yoga helped me expand the breath. And then Sufis helped me dance with the breath, or know that God was breathing me, or things like that. So
the flow started.
Say that again.
The flow started. And, as you're talking about, when we don't like something, we were talking about anger before, there's a rigidity in the body. So that when we actually face it, it starts to open by itself. And when you were talking about your mother getting more nervous, I think it could be that we all know how to take the breath in, but we all don't know how to let all of the breath out. That exhale is most important, because if you don't soften and exhale, you can't take a deep breath. So you've got a rigidity. You're breathing in and you're holding on. There's no letting go. And the letting go that's natural with the breath is like, we always hear, let it go, let it go.
Yeah.
It's a natural thing that's going on with every human being, whether they want to let go or not. You must let go in order to breathe again. So you need a full exhale so that you can take it in. And if you're rigid and anxious, you prohibit yourself from taking the next breath, because you feel like the anxiousness is you and more important. So you're holding on to what you don't like, what doesn't work. So being conscious of the breath means you let it come in and you fully let it go. And in that, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm so happy we're talking about this, because that plays to the spiritual law that giving is receiving. And what I've learned is that receiving is also giving. So if I can allow myself to receive breath, then I can also give breath. And that would be the long, full exhale. In fact, in working with anxious people, I started recommending that they begin with an exhale, because everybody can exhale. They don't worry about that. They're worried about the inhale.
That's a good idea. I like that. So exhale first.
Yes.
And now breathe. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. And if you really follow that exhale, you'll see that you're giving up all of your worry. And if your conditioning is that life is worry, it's very hard to give it up. It's very hard to just let everything go, because that's exactly what we're doing. Our worries about the future, our past mistakes, whatever we're, holding on to, you naturally let it go in the exhale.
It's funny, because my dad, who's 91 years old now, his whole life, he's always said that he worries about us, his family. And it's a joke now that that's synonymous in my dad's mind with loving us. If he worries about us, it means he loves us.
He's a good person.
Very good.
He lives down here, right?
Yes, in Boca.
Yeah, you used to visit me sometimes when you'd visit him.
That's right. Yeah, but what's fun is that he and I can laugh about that now. Whereas, for a good chunk of time, of course, Amy was trying to fix Dad by explaining to him that worrying about me wasn't doing me any good. And finally, I reached a point where it became humorous. And
it didn't work. He's fine.
He's fine. He's fine. It's working for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think the last question I'd like to ask you is, do you have any explanation around what death is?
Well, that's a light question. Hmm. Could you be more specific?
It's fun talking about death because most people are afraid of it. I'm more afraid of suffering. To me, death, if the person is snuffed out or the body drops away, I have such a sense now that the knowing is what's here, that what used to be a big fear for me when I was young, little, death, it no longer feels like a concern. For me, the concern is suffering. I don't like the idea of the long goodbye or a painful or being incapacitated and not having my independence. That doesn't appeal to me. But people often get tripped up with the idea of their own death or the death of a loved one. And I think it's useful to give them another way of looking at these things.
Okay. I think that what you're saying and the way most people are looking at death is the finality and really the nerve of no more me. I mean, really, that's the most horrible thing in the world, that I, as I know myself, don't exist anymore. Because I put so much into it. I know existing and consciousness through my knowingness of this person. I am extremely attached to that because we're talking about me here. I mean, let's get real. So no more me means no more experiences, positive or negative, rainy days or sunny days, ones I like and ones I don't like. It's still my experience, and I don't want that to end. So I think that we're in a very kind of, we completely deny death. It's like we're shocked when somebody goes. We completely suppress the whole idea that it's coming to an end. And I think that when we start looking at the temporariness of every single thing, if we go into our past, we desired things, achieved them, and then they ended. Everything dies in its own way. Even the breath that we were talking about. When you breathe in, you get fresh life in that moment. And when it leaves, that particular breath dies. We call it an exhale. We soften it. We don't like to even consider death. It's the enemy. It's considered the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all about the person and their awareness of consciousness. And that's how they know they're alive. So what we've been talking about here is another way of knowing who we are, that expansiveness, that which we, might think that great sages are in this high state, but actually we are the same. So the more we know ourselves as this openness, the less we are attached to the body that's aware of this existence. Existence becomes like a different knowing. And I would like to think, I don't know anybody who could really describe actual death. We have an awful lot of people giving their opinions about it. But I would like to think that the openness that I'm aware of now, that I'll merge into that I'll merge into the awareness of the openness that I have discovered in a body. And then when the body goes, the openness remains.
Yes.
That would be very nice. That's why I'm cultivating it as much as I can while I'm alive. I'm enjoying my life more because of it, on top of it. the more I leave it, the more it gets better. But it's not because I'm efforting to make the life better. I'm putting my attention on that which is way beyond my own expectations or desires. And
Yes,
maybe,
yes, that makes perfect sense. Is that what the title of your book means, The Great Undoing?
yes, undoing the web of the personality as being the end all and turning inward to seeing what's really always been here forever. That's what the sages have always been telling us. Turn inside. Okay, good, let's do that. How do you do that? First of all, knowing it and getting your mind, to understand that you mean business, get through that thick skull of ours that we're going to be spending time away from giving you the total power. And then being able to leave it alone and experience something completely different.
So, how would you recommend that people do spend time? Do you recommend meditation, attending satsang? What can we leave them with as something practical to quote unquote do?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Well, I know that I personally tried to meet as many people, masters, as I could. Reading helps if you can read their works. Whatever opens you to the openness is what I would recommend. When I offer satsang, we come in and whatever it is that we're doing, talking, laughing, meditating, whatever it is, the silence comes first. The silence is running the show. So I found that was very beneficial for me because it stops the mind from pulling you in all different directions. Stops the mind completely. Whatever works, do it. I recommend it. Just like what you're doing.
Yes, yeah. I'd like people to know that if they'd like to attend your satsangs and they're not in Florida, that you now have virtual satsang, correct?
Yeah, I do.
And
Yeah.
how can they do that? Is it a website that they should go to, Stuart?
Well, I have a website. It's satsangwithstuart.com. And there's a calendar. It's usually the third Sunday of the month. And I hold it in Florida at 1:00. So it's in the morning at your time and in the evening in Europe. Yeah.
Okay. And if they want to attend virtually, do they just click a link to sign up? Do they have to pay a small fee or?
Yeah, there's a small fee and it's on the website. People can follow that.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Were you going to say one more thing?
Well, I was going to say that I offer retreats also.
Yeah, tell them everything you offer.
Okay. Well, I travel to Ireland 2 or 3 times a year to a small castle, which has become a retreat center in Tipperary. It's a long way to Tipperary. And it's on some beautiful grounds. It's a beautiful area of the world. And we have satsang there for 5 days in the fall, in the winter, and in the summer. And other teachers go there also now. Well, they can go to my website and see all the different places where I offer retreats.
I'd like to share with people that I've attended Stuart's satsangs starting, I think it was about 10 years ago, and that it's always had this warm, casual, embracing feeling, just a feeling that you can go right up to Stuart and confide in him or ask him something, and there's nothing lofty about it.
I try and make it as real as possible,
Yeah, so you don't have to feel intimidated. And as I said, I had this practical. They're practical. Yeah. And I had this big pop, where Stuart somehow had his finger on my pulse, noticed something was going on with me, which was this sort of forced gratitude. And what I meant to say earlier, and I'd like to say now, is that I felt very grateful that you released me from having to be grateful.
Well, you're welcome. 10 years later, you're very welcome.
But it's funny, the paradox of it, it's exactly a demonstration of what you've been saying, that when I allowed myself to do the forcible gratitude and then be openly busted for it in a very gentle way, and then admit that, oh yeah, I wasn't feeling really good at all, then this natural, spontaneous gratitude flooded up.
Funny how that works, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'd like all listeners and viewers to have that experience for yourselves. And Stuart is one great way for that to happen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So it's great speaking with you, Stuart. And we're going to continue. We're going to say goodbye now, but we're going to have a private conversation afterwards that those of you who feel moved to continue listening can offer a donation to help me fund these videos and podcasts. And I'll give you the information as to how to do that and listen in on our next conversation. So thank you very much, Stuart, and namaste.
Namaste.